The Florida sun, a relentless golden hammer, beat down on the impossibly green lawns of Marcus Thorne's oceanfront mansion. This wasn't just a house, it was a testament to his ambition, a sprawling monument of glass, marble, and polished steel. Every corner screamed wealth, from the infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the ocean to the gleaming 150-foot yacht, the Invictus, moored in its private marina. Marcus, a man in his late 40s with a shark smile and a wardrobe of bespoke suits, was the undisputed king of this kingdom. He was on his phone, barking orders to a subordinate in a high-rise in Miami, completely oblivious to the world outside his financial bubble. Inside, Elena, his housekeeper, moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long since learned to be invisible. An immigrant with a deep, ancestral respect for the earth and sky, she was a stark contrast to Marcus's digital, disconnected world. She was dusting a ridiculously expensive sculpture when a strange stillness fell over the air. The usual coastal breeze died. The birds stopped singing. She looked out the panoramic window. The sky, which had been a clear, unapologetic blue just moments before, was now a bruised, sickly green. A low pressure in her ears made her feel dizzy, a sensation she hadn't experienced since her childhood in rural Mexico, where her grandmother had taught her to read the moods of the clouds. She walked to the patio where Marcus was lounging, a glass of champagne in his hand. He hadn't noticed a thing. The only storm he cared about was the one brewing on Wall Street. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice a little shaky. "The sky, it's not right. My grandmother used to say a sky like that means a big storm is coming, a tornado." Marcus lowered his sunglasses just enough to give her a dismissive stare. "Elena, please," he chuckled, a sound as cold and sharp as his wit. "You've been watching too much TV. This is Florida. We get thunderstorms. The radar is clear. The weather app on my phone says we're fine." He took a long, leisurely sip of his champagne, a gesture of ultimate nonchalance. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm trying to close a deal that's worth more than this entire house." Her pleas were met with more arrogance. "I'm telling you, it's different. The quiet, the color." His laughter cut her off. "A quiet before the storm? How poetic. Go back to your work, Elena. This isn't a soap opera." But the quiet didn't last. A low rumble, faint at first, began to vibrate through the very foundation of the mansion. It wasn't the sound of thunder. It was deeper, more menacing, like a freight train barreling through the air. Marcus, now genuinely annoyed, sat up. "What in the hell is that?" The sound grew to a deafening roar. The palm trees, which had been standing so proudly, bent and twisted like tortured dancers. Debris, leaves, and bits of a neighbor's roof began to fly past the window. The air, thick with dust and a metallic scent, was a chaotic blur. Marcus's perfectly manicured lawn was being scalped by an invisible force. Panic, a feeling alien to him, began to creep into his chest. His carefully constructed world was coming apart. "What's happening?" he yelled over the sound. Elena, her face a mask of grim determination, grabbed his arm. "It's here! The basement now!" She pulled him, a man used to giving orders like a child. He stumbled after her, his mind struggling to comprehend the destruction unfolding around them. The floor beneath them shook violently. A window imploded, sending a shower of glass shards across the room. The roar was now so loud it was a physical force, pressing down on their bodies. Just as they reached the hallway leading to the basement stairs, he heard it, the splintering, groaning sound of the Invictus being ripped from its moorings. He caught a glimpse of it, a white speck in the maelstrom, before a wall of the mansion's wing was simply torn away. The last sound he heard before Eleanor shoved him down the stairs and the door slammed shut was the sickening crunch of his home collapsing in on itself. The silence that followed the storm was absolute, a profound quiet that felt heavier than the roar that had preceded it. Marcus and Elena were trapped in the suffocating darkness of the basement. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, pulverized plaster, and the metallic tang of fear. A small, weak beam of light from Elena's phone was the only thing cutting through the oppressive gloom. Marcus, a man who had built an empire, was now reduced to a shell-shocked figure, his expensive suit ripped and smeared with dirt. His mind, accustomed to calculating risks and profits, was now a blank slate. Elena, despite a deep gash on her forearm from a falling piece of debris, was the picture of composure. She had seen this kind of resilience in her community, a strength born not of wealth but of necessity. "Mr. Thorne," she asked softly, her voice steady, "are you hurt?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes wide and vacant. "The house, the yacht, it's all gone. Gone." His voice was a thin, disbelieving whisper. He was trapped, not just physically, but in the ruins of his own reality. "We need to get out of here," Eleanor stated, her phone light scanning the low ceiling. "The foundations are still settling. We can't stay." She began to look for a way out. She had always been observant, a skill born from her profession. She remembered a small, hidden access panel behind a utility closet that led to a narrow, crawl-space-like passage. It was meant for maintenance, but could serve as their only escape route. The journey was a brutal, humbling experience for Marcus. He who had walked on marble and velvet now crawled on his hands and knees through a tight, debris-filled tunnel. Elena went first, her voice a calming presence in the dark. She used her body to push aside loose bricks and wood, and she directed Marcus, who was clumsy and hesitant. The physical effort was new to him. His muscles screamed in protest, and his carefully manicured hands were scraped and bleeding. At one point, their path was completely blocked by a large, heavy section of collapsed concrete. "It's no good," Marcus sighed, defeat in his voice. "We're stuck." Elena didn't give up. "No, we're not," she said, her voice firm. "We can move it. Together." She found a sturdy metal bar, and with Marcus's stunned obedience, they began to pry at the edge of the slab. It was back-breaking work. With every push and pull, a new kind of bond formed between them. Marcus saw the raw strength and determination in her eyes, a strength he had never bothered to look for before. When he finally felt the slab give way, a new feeling surged through him. Not the joy of a closed deal, but the pure animal satisfaction of survival. In a moment of shared exhaustion and relief, she noticed his hand was bleeding badly. Without a word, she ripped a piece of her own dirt-stained shirt and wrapped it around his wound. It was a simple act, one he would have once scoffed at, but now it felt like the most profound gesture of compassion he had ever received. Finally, they reached the end of the passage. Pushing open a small, flimsy hatch, they squinted against the blinding daylight. What met their eyes was not the world they had known, but a landscape of utter desolation. Their once grand mansion was a pile of rubble. The meticulously sculpted gardens were a chaotic mess of torn-up trees and mangled metal. The beach was littered with debris from what must have been dozens of homes. As they emerged from the ruins, they were met by the sight of first responders, firefighters, paramedics, and volunteers working tirelessly. A paramedic rushed over to them, but Marcus, in a moment that would change him forever, waved them toward Elena first. "She's the one who needs help. She saved my life." He looked at her, his face a mix of shame and gratitude. The billionaire was gone. In his place was a man who had faced his own mortality, stripped of his wealth and his pride, and found a hero in the person he had laughed at. Several months later, the scars of the tornado were still visible across the Florida coast, but so too was the spirit of resilience. The empty lot where Marcus Thorne's mansion once stood was now just that, an empty lot, a memory of a life that no longer existed. The Invictus had been a complete loss, its remains a cautionary tale on a remote beach. But Marcus Thorne himself had not been lost. He was in many ways just found, the man who now sat in a modest office, its walls decorated not with awards, but with architectural blueprints, was a different person. He had sold off a large portion of his remaining assets, not for another mansion or a new yacht, but to start a foundation. The mission: to build sustainable, affordable, and disaster-resistant housing for communities most vulnerable to natural disasters. He named it the Thorn and Elena Foundation. Elena was no longer his housekeeper, she was his partner. Her instinctive knowledge of climate patterns and her deep connection to community became the soul of the foundation. She worked alongside architects and engineers, drawing on the wisdom of her ancestors and her own lived experience to design homes that weren't just houses, but fortresses of safety and hope. She'd share stories of how her family learned to build with certain materials, or where to create a safe space for shelter, wisdom that now powered a multi-million-dollar philanthropic endeavor. The first project was a small community of 50 homes built a few miles inland from the coast. The houses, simple and elegant, were designed with reinforced roofs, hurricane-proof windows, and safe rooms. They were homes for families who had lost everything, families who had no private yacht or billion-dollar insurance policy. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first new home, Marcus stood on a small stage, a microphone in his hand. He was dressed in a simple button-down shirt and jeans, a far cry from his old uniform. The crowd was a mix of local families, volunteers, and media. He looked out at them, and then his eyes found Elena in the front row. "I used to believe that success was measured by what you could own," he began, his voice clear and humble. "I had a mansion, I had a yacht, I had all the things that money could buy, but in a matter of seconds, they were all gone. And when I was trapped, buried in the rubble, it wasn't my money that saved me. It was the wisdom, the courage, and the pure humanity of a woman I had laughed at." He gestured to Eleanor, a proud and loving smile on his face. "Eleanor is a hero, and this foundation, these homes, are a direct result of her courage and her belief in community. My life isn't about buying things anymore, it's about building them for everyone." The speech was met with a thunderous applause. As the ceremony ended, a little girl from one of the new homes ran up to Marcus and handed him a drawing she had made. A simple crayon drawing of a house with a smiling sun above it. He looked at the drawing, then at Eleanor, and for the first time since the storm, he felt a profound sense of peace. The wreckage of his old life had made way for a new, far more meaningful one. The final shot is of the two of them, standing together, looking at the homes they had built, not out of greed, but out of a shared, powerful belief in helping others. The sky above was a brilliant blue, a calm that felt earned and cherished.